All right, on to the wonderful world of loops. Today we're going to talk about loops. Loops are one of the most useful things you can learn in programming. Why? Because loops allow you to write a little bit of code and repeat lots and lots of tasks. Anytime you have a repetitive task, you want to use a loop. So basically, whenever you look at code and you see yourself writing the same line of code over and over again, just copy and pasting it lots of times, you should write a loop. So there are a bunch of different types of loops. I'm going to teach you how to use a basic loop, which is called a for loop. There are also while loops and do while loops, but we're just going to work on a for loop. A for loop has a very standard syntax. It always starts with for, and then you give it a variable. We're just going to call it var. A variable is the same thing like you would see in math, where x could equal 3 or 5 or pi or whatever, 3.14, whatever you want it to equal. Variables are the same things. They're symbols that are mutable. In other words, they can change their values. So here, the for loop will start with for, a variable name, in, and then you have to give it a list of things that it is going to loop through. So in this case, I'm going to give it a list called word 1, word 2, word 3, word 4. Next, in Unix, this is very specific to Unix, if I hit return, I then write do. And inside of do, I can now write the commands that I would like to have happen every time this loop goes through what's known as an iteration or a cycle. In this case, I'm going to print out the value for this variable. So I'm going to use a command called echo, and all echo does is print out something to the screen. And to get this variable to print out, I have to precede it with a $sign. And then I hit return and write done. When I hit return, what you'll notice is that I say, hey, I want you to print out this variable 1. It's going to, first time through the loop, it's going to print out the first item in this list. The second time through the loop, it's going to print out the second item in this list. The third time in this loop, it's going to print out the third item list and the fourth item of the list. You get the picture. And I can do any kind of list I want. So you notice I can actually, if I hit the up arrow, it'll show you an alternate syntax for writing loops, where you have to put a semicolon after the list and a semicolon after every line of code you have inside of your loops. But in addition to words, I could also use numbers. And it doesn't matter what I put in this list, var will be fine with it no matter what I do. I could also, instead of using numbers this way, if I'm using numbers, not words, I can actually use a shorthand to print out every number between 1 and 5 using these brackets and these dots. In addition to printing out a list such as this, I can print out lists that I can just find within my database. So for instance, let's say I wanted to print out the names, I wanted to look at different files that had .seq in them. Here, I could write for, and we'll call it file. We'll change the name of the variable. The variable name could be anything, by the way. It could be it could be Qbert, it could be anything I want it to be. But I'm going to call it file because I like to call my variables what they are. So for file in, here I can use the wildcard and .seq to look at all of the sequence files in this list, in this directory, right? Because I'm saying for the files in this directory that end in seq, I want you to do something. So we'll just echo the file name. first. And you can see it'll go through and it'll list each and every one of these files as it cycles through. Now say instead of just printing out their file names, I wanted to do something to those files. I could then do something like grep AAA and the file name. Every time through this iteration, it'll start on the first item in this list, because basically when you use this *seek, you've created a list of these items, all the items that end in .seek. It'll start with the first item in the list. It'll look for A, and it'll print out any lines it finds. And then it'll go to the next item in the list and do the same thing. Oops. I've made a slight mistake. Do grep AAA, and we're going to put that $ instead of that file. And here it's printed out every line that has 4 A's in it. Here I could do the same thing, but let's say I wanted to store these lines someplace. I can use the double caret to append the results of each search to one file. Then if I look in there, I can see all the files, or all the lines are there. This is much better than if I just do redirect, because if I redirect it, what you find is that it'll replace it each time it goes through that loop. Because remember, it's starting, it's going to look at the first file in that list, and then it's going to grep. It'll go back to the beginning, and it'll look at the next file in that list, this one, and grep for it. Then it'll look at the next file in the list, and grep for it. You can put as many lines of code into this expression as you like. So for instance, let's say I wanted the name of the file to be printed to in this subsequent results file. So I could say for file in seek do echo the file variable and I'll do echo. First I will echo the file name into the file, and then I'll use grep into the file. Now for each file, first it'll print the file name or the value for the variable file and add it to the file, and then it'll add in any lines that would go at the end that would match this regular expression to this file. So if we look at the results, we can see that there's the file name for the first file, the first item in the list, and the lines that match. And the file name for the second item in the list, and the lines that match. And the file in the third item in the list, and the lines that match from that file. And etc., etc. So that's a really quick primer on how for loops work. Again, they're wonderful methods used to do repetitive tasks. Thanks. Oh, and please do the quiz, which I will also post online.